In a village wrapped in mist and shadow, there lived an old man named Elric. His cottage stood at the edge of the forest, where the trees whispered ancient secrets, though Elric no longer listened. Once a warrior with a heart full of fire, he now spent his days in quiet retreat. His sword, once bright with the glow of battle, lay forgotten beneath layers of dust in the corner of his home. Each morning, Elric sat upon a weathered bench, watching as life unfurled before him. Birds sang, children ran through the fields, and the village hummed with its daily rhythm. But Elric's eyes saw none of it, his mind far from the world around him. "I have done enough," he often whispered, as if trying to silence a voice deep inside. "I've earned my peace." Years had dimmed his fire, or so he thought. Where once he sought battle and purpose, he now sought stillness. But that stillness was heavy, thick, like fog clinging too long after dawn. His life drifted by, one day into the next, until time itself seemed distant and irrelevant. Yet the world did not stand still. Travelers came through the village with stories of far-off lands and battles still fought. One traveler, a young man with fire in his eyes, spoke of dragons stirring in the mountains. The villagers gathered to hear of the dangers beyond their borders, but Elric remained on his bench, unmoved. "Such battles are no longer mine," he muttered. His war was long over, or so he believed. The nights grew restless as rumors spread of a dragon set on the village. Elric felt the air change, the weight of something looming just beyond the horizon. But still, he sat. His hands trembled at night, not from fear, but from an unspoken guilt that gnawed at him like an old wound. He told himself he was too old, too tired. Let others bear the burden now. One evening, the ground trembled. A roar shook the sky, and fire lit the night as the dragon descended. The young traveler, brave but inexperienced, rallied the villagers to fight. They stood with trembling hands, their faces pale beneath the glow of flames. Elric, from the darkness of his cottage, watched. His heart beat fast, his hands clenched, but he did nothing. "It is not my fight," he told himself once more, though the words felt hollow. The battle raged through the night, the dragon's fury unmatched. Cries echoed through the streets as homes crumbled beneath the beast's might. The young traveler fought valiantly, but his sword was no match for the creature's fire. Dawn came, and with it, silence. The dragon returned to its lair, leaving the village in ruin. Elric, his heart heavy with regret, stepped outside. Ash hung in the air, and the faces of the villagers, once full of hope, were now etched with sorrow. The young traveler lay in the square, his eyes turned skyward, his sword fallen beside him. Elric stood over the fallen hero, breath shallow as the weight of his choices pressed down on him. The fire he had once known still flickered within, but he had let it die to embers. He had mistaken stillness for peace, complacency for wisdom. In his quiet retreat, he had let others suffer, let the village fall, and let himself wither. He knelt beside the young traveler, feeling the cold grip of realization. His inaction had cost them all. Peace had not come from his silence. It had only dulled him, numbed his spirit. Complacency, like the dragon, had scorched the land while he watched from the shadows. Elric rose, his legs unsteady, but his resolve firm. His hands, worn with age, reached for the fallen sword. It was heavy in his grasp, but familiar. He had forgotten the weight of it, forgotten the way it felt to stand against the tide. The battle was not just against dragons, it was against the quiet death that had crept into his soul. As the villagers began to rebuild, Elric knew his time of sitting idle was over. He could no longer hide behind the pretense of peace. He had rested long enough, and in that rest he had let life slip away. Complacency had stolen more from him than any battle ever had. With sword in hand, Elric set his gaze toward the mountains, where the dragon still lurked. The beast was not defeated, nor was Elric. Though his body ached and his years weighed heavy, there was a fire within that had not yet gone out. He walked forward, slow but steady, no longer content to sit and watch. The path ahead was uncertain, the battle perhaps too great for a man of his years. But Elric had learned that the greatest enemy was not the dragon. It was the comfort that lured him into stillness, the complacency that dulled his heart. He would fight that battle now, and fight it until his last breath. As the first light of dawn broke over the village, Elric knew there was no true peace in stillness, only in the striving, in the living. To live was to rise, even when the body was weary and the heart begged for rest. And so he walked into the dawn, a man reborn, ready to face the world once more.